Now let's take a look at tangent of x and how do we find the values of different angles if we're using tangent. Well, in the previous two videos I showed you how do you find the values for cosine and how do you find the values for sine just in your head. Now let's figure out how would you figure out the value of tangent. So first let's write down something. Let's just say I wanted to know what's tangent of pi over 3, let's say. Well, the first thing I have to do is I remember, wait a second, tangent of x is the same thing as sine of x divided by the cosine of x. So tangent of x by definition is the sine of x divided by the cosine of x. So if I'm talking about tangent of pi over 3, really what I'm talking about is the tangent, I'm talking about the sine of pi over 3 divided by the cosine of pi over 3. So I don't actually need to memorize all of the values of tangent. If you want to, great, it'll save you just a little bit of time. But if you don't want to memorize all of the unit circle values of tangent, that's perfectly okay as long as you know how to figure it out for sine and cosine. Now, if I want to know for, let's say, pi over 3, well, first of all, I need to know where is pi over 3 on the unit circle. And pi over 3 is this angle. This is pi over 3. And let's put in the other important angles here. That's pi over 4, pi over 6, here's 0. And if I'm trying to figure out what sine of pi over 3, well, sine is 1 up here. Or if you prefer, square root of 4 over 2. So that means that the angle right next to it is square root of 3 over 2. So sine of pi over 3, sine of pi over 3 is square root of 3 over 2. So the top of this fraction is the square root of 3 over 2 divided by the cosine of pi over 3. Well, the cosine is 1 here. So this is square root of 4 over 2, square root of 3 over 2, square root of 2 over 2, square root of 1 over 2, or 1/2. So this is 1/2. The cosine of pi over 3 is 1/2. Now I can flip and multiply. I get that this is square root 3 over 2 times 2 over 1. The 2's cancel, and I get the square root of 3. So tangent of pi over 3 is square root 3, and we're done. Now, I didn't have to remember this value because I know what the sine is, I know what the cosine is, so I get the tangent value for free. Let's do one more just to make sure that we've got it. Let's look at tangent of, let's say, 11 pi over 6. Well, as I just said, tangent is sine of x over cosine of x. So tangent of 11 pi over 6 is going to be equal to the sine of 11 pi over 6 divided by the cosine of 11 pi over 6. So we just need to figure out what's the sine of 11 pi over 6 and what's the cosine of 11 pi over 6. Let's start with sine. Now, for sine, here's 11 pi over 6. And we don't need to write this down on a board. We could just think about it in our head. That's absolutely fine. But since we've got the board here and I'm trying to demonstrate it for you, I'll write it down so we can see it. But if we are looking at sine of 11 pi over 6, remember that sine is square root 4 over 2 up here, or 1. So this is square root 3 over 2, square root 2 over 2, square root 1 over 2, 0. So sine of 0 is 0. And then it would go negative 1 over 2. So the top is negative 1/2. So sine of 11 pi over 6 is negative 1/2. What about cosine of 11 pi over 6? Well, cosine is 1 here, or square root 4 over 2. So that if I drop down 1 off of that, it's square root 3 over 2. So this would be square root 3 over 2. So this is minus 1/2 times 2 over root 3. The 2's cancel, and I'm just left with negative 1 over root 3. And so the tangent of 11 pi over 6 is negative 1 over root 3. If you don't like to have square roots in your denominator, you could always write that as negative root 3 over 3. So that's how we calculate tangent.